I know you're ready for a new story, but tonight we're going to dive into a different tale than the usual stories. This one is drenched in pain and blood, where freedom was paid for with every heartbeat. However, I promise this isn't just another story. It's a journey deep into a world where survival hung by the thinnest thread. Today I want to tell you about a time when Rome ruled the world with an iron fist, when a man's fate was measured by the clinking of chains and the value of life was lost in the roar of the arenas. From the blood and dust, a name rose to become legend: Spartacus. But who exactly was Spartacus, the gladiator whose name made an empire tremble? I challenge you to imagine how a single enslaved man could inspire thousands to rise and follow him into battle. But Spartacus did not merely inspire. He awakened a fury within those crushed by Rome's cruelty. He wasn't born to greatness. His legacy began not with glory, but with chains and scars from battles forced upon him. But beneath the brutality of the arena, within Spartacus's battered heart, something extraordinary ignited a defiance that Rome could never extinguish. Are you ready to bear with me as we uncover how a gladiator challenged the empire for a dream of freedom and human dignity? Discover how Spartacus did not bend, not even when his men began to falter. Not even when faced with the merciless challenge of Crassus. He confronted his enemy in open battle, fighting to his last breath, to the very last drop of blood. Picture tens of thousands marching side by side, their steps shaking the very foundations of Italy. But could Spartacus truly stand against Rome's limitless legions and ruthless generals? We'll bring you face to face with Crassus, a man who personified Rome's merciless power. But Spartacus, refusing to surrender even when betrayal closed every escape route, faced Crassus head-on, fighting to the very last breath. Tonight you'll witness courage, desperation, and an epic clash of ideals. But did Spartacus achieve anything lasting, or did his rebellion vanish into history's cruel shadows? I promise this. Spartacus' legacy lives on, a fiery symbol of resistance, and tonight you'll learn exactly why. Now, relax in a comfortable position. Our stories don't require you to watch the video. They are narrated to guide you on a relaxing journey to fall asleep as you listen. Feel your body relaxing, your shoulders, your hips. A warm feeling slowly relaxes your entire body from head to toe, as if you are entering a warm bath of soothing water. Your body begins to relax as the water slowly rises from your feet to your legs, your torso, your shoulders. You feel every single muscle becoming more and more relaxed. Feel the comfort of this moment. Focus on the story and allow the narrative to gently lead you toward a comfortable sleep. And now, let the world of our heroes begin. I am Spartacus. Yes, Spartacus, the man who dared to defy Rome, the gladiator who shattered the chains of fear, the man who lit the spark of freedom amidst blood, sweat, and the clash of swords. I was no myth. I was no legend. I was flesh, bone, and iron will, and today, with a voice that still echoes in the mountains that once gave me refuge, I tell you my story. Do not think it all began in a single day. The revolt, the war, the dream of freedom. They were not born in an instant. It wasn't a sudden idea, like a lightning bolt tearing through the sky. No, it was like a slow fire smoldering beneath the ashes. I felt it growing day after day, in every blow struck in the arena, in every scream of pain torn from my brothers robbed of their freedom, in every glance of hatred and hope we exchanged before fighting for the entertainment of wealthy Romans. I was a Thracian, born free, born a warrior. But cruel fate or mocking gods brought me in chains to Capua, to the gladiator school of Lentulus Batiatus. There, within the walls of the ludus, I learned to fight to survive. But I did not fight just to live. I observed, I listened, I learned. And in the silence of the night, when the clash of shields had faded and sweat dried on our skin, I thought. I thought of my homeland, of fallen comrades, of the freedom we had lost. And I swore to myself, one day I would break those chains. When they brought me to the ludus of Capua, I was no longer a free man. Once I had been a warrior, born to fight among the mountains, but now I was nothing more than a man stripped of liberty. A number, a body to be trained, flesh to be thrown into the arena. The gates of the school closed behind me with a sound like a sentence being passed. That place was both prison and barracks, a training camp, and a cage for beasts destined to bleed. As soon as I arrived, I was stripped of everything that had belonged to me. They examined me, felt my muscles, made me run, lift weights, strike the air. The lanista, Lentulus Batiatus, and his magister, the instructor, watched my every move. I was there to be turned into a gladiator, but first they had to decide what type I would be. Thracian, Murmilio, Retiarius. In the end, they assigned me to my people's style. I would fight as a Thracian, with a small shield, a tall crested helmet, and a curved sword, the seeker. Every day began at dawn. There was no time for complaints. The sound of the horn was enough to get us in line. We ran barefoot on hard ground, then lifted stone weights and moved on to simulated combat. The rudis, the wooden sword, became our daily bread. We struck endlessly at the palace, a post driven into the earth, imagining an enemy's face on it. The magister showed no mercy. Every movement was corrected with shouting, beatings, or public humiliation. We had to learn to be lethal, but also spectacular. A perfect blend of art and war. The training was not only physical, we had to learn to perform death. Every duel was a show, the gestures, the shouts, the falls. Everything had to be worthy of the crowd's favor, all staged as part of a macabre spectacle. But I never forgot who I was. Every strike I delivered was a whisper of revenge. Every fall a promise that one day I would rise again, not as a gladiator, but as a free man. Our food was simple, but designed to make us resilient. We didn't eat meat. They gave us barley, beans, bread, and some vegetables. Some called it pig food, but it made us strong, sturdy, ready to endure blows. Before fights, we received honeyed sweets and flatbreads with oil for energy. They called us barley eaters. The body hardened, yes, but it was the mind that was truly tested. The terror of the arena, the looming idea of death at every fight, we had to learn to control it. There were exercises, techniques, even ancient words we repeated like mantras. But I had my own strength, the memory of my land, my people, and the lost freedom. Every night before sleep, I swore to myself that one day I would break those chains. In the ludus, discipline was absolute. We lived in cells, slept on hard planks, watched day and night. Every escape attempt was punished by death. Yet, within those walls, a strange brotherhood was born. We were oppressed, but bound by the same fate. It was called Familia Gladiatoria, and it was the only family we had left. We shared pain, sweat, wounds, and even fear. After months of training, I was judged ready. I received real weapons, shiny, heavy, charged with destiny. The day of my first fight came with a pale, silent dawn. The sky was gray, as if even the gods were holding their breath. My comrades said nothing that morning, only a few silent looks and the dull sound of polished metal. I wouldn't be the only one fighting for the first time that day, and the tension among us was palpable. The lanista handed me the helmet, the shield, and the seca. Real weapons, sharp. No more wooden rudies. No more drills. Those weapons were now made to kill or to die. It wasn't my first time fighting, of course, but there's a difference between fighting in battle for a cause, for your people, for your family, and fighting for show in the arena. Death was the same, but the anger was different. The corridor leading to the arena was dark and narrow. The noise of the crowd reached me muffled, like a distant roar, growing louder with every step. My heart beat like a war drum in my chest. My hands sweated, and the skin beneath the armor prickled as if something inside me was trying to break free. It was fear, but it was more than that. It was rage. It was thirst. When I stepped into the light, the arena blinded me. White sand, packed stands, eyes fixed on me like invisible blades. And in front of me, him, my opponent, almost as tall as a tree, red hair braided, body covered with scars. The eyes. I will never forget those eyes. There was no mercy there, only fierce calm. He had already killed others. He knew his craft well, and that day, he wanted to kill me. The horn's sound marked the start of the duel. There was no hesitation. My opponent charged like a beast, shield wide, sword raised high above his head. I barely had time to parry the blow with my shield and roll to the side. The sickle almost slipped from my hand. I felt the wind of his strike cut through the air where my neck had been moments before. He was strong, fast, determined. I, on the other hand, was trembling, legs stiff, arms slow. But I couldn't run. There was no way out, no chance to escape. So I got up. I attacked him with a feint, low to his left side. He easily blocked it. He was an experienced gladiator. He responded with an elbow to my face. The helmet saved me, but the pain was sharp, sudden, unexpected. I staggered backward. Blood was singing in my ears. Then something happened. Maybe instinct, maybe desperation. I saw an opening. The gladiator had exposed his right side for a moment while preparing his thrust. I shouted and struck. One single blow, sharp, under the ribs. Not deep, but enough to make him retreat. His eyes widened, surprised for the first time. He was breathing heavily. So was I. We circled each other like two wounded wolves. The sand beneath our feet turned to mud, soaked with sweat and blood. I could feel the crowd had gone mad. They shouted, clapped their hands, and stomped their feet, demanding blood. But in that moment, for me, there was only silence. There was only him, and my life hanging on the tip of my sword. The last exchange was a furious dance. He hit me on the shoulder. I felt metal dig into flesh. I screamed, but I didn't fall. With my left hand, I pushed him away, and with my right, I struck. This time the blow was good. I cut his thigh. He staggered. I took advantage, another strike, then another. Finally, he collapsed to his knees. He looked at me not with hatred, but with weariness, with acceptance. I stopped. My sword was ready, but I didn't move. I was waiting for the verdict. All eyes in the arena were fixed on me. Then a hand rose. The thumb was not lowered. Life. I had won, and I could spare my opponent's life. But I felt no triumph. I felt only weak legs, short breath, and one tear. Yes, just one that ran down my face beneath the helmet. That was my baptism. I never forgot my opponent. That day he taught me that every man kneels sooner or later. But true courage is in rising again. And I rose, not as a crushed man, no longer. In that moment, under the blazing sun and amidst the roar of the crowd, I began to feel something breaking inside me. Not fear, but the chains. I was not only deprived of my freedom, I was a gladiator. Meanwhile, in Rome, there was the Republic. Oh, the Republic. That's what Rome called itself. A republic built on blood, violence, domination. A republic that claimed to bring civilization and order, but in reality fed on suffering. For every victory, for every new province conquered, thousands of men and women lost everything. And Rome? Rome turned them into slaves, stripped of freedom. Like me. The Senate, that nest of vipers adorned with purple, held unlimited power. The legions marched in every direction, east against the Parthians, west towards the Gauls, south across the sea wherever there were lands to plunder, riches to steal, peoples to bend, and every conquest meant thousands of new prisoners, thousands of new slaves. I saw them with my own eyes in market squares, in cages under the sun. We were not numbers. We were peoples. We were communities. We spoke the same language, prayed to the same gods, great gods forgotten by Rome, ancient and proud gods. We recognized each other in accents, in gestures, in scars, and we held each other close, because it was all we had left. In those chains, brotherhood was born. From despair, solidarity was born. Rome didn't understand this. Or maybe it did, but didn't fear it. It thought terror alone was enough to keep us apart. It thought the blood from whips could extinguish every spark of rebellion. But they were wrong. Many of us were put to work in the fields, in the mines, or in the pastures. The shepherds, the luckiest among us, it was said. They could breathe the air, see the sky, but often they carried sticks, small knives, weapons that looked harmless. Yet they were the spark. Those arms, hardened by work and hunger, became as strong as those of a legionary. And those shepherds, silent, walked like soldiers. They were ready. I myself, as a gladiator, had learned the art of war in the form of a show. But beneath the fake blows of the games, I was learning the true moves of survival. Every strike, Every parry, every wound was a piece of my return to freedom. We gladiators had no masters in our hearts. We fought to live and to remember who we were. But I still remembered when I was still a free man back then, when I first heard talk of the great revolt in Sicily. I was in Thrace, far from the smell of Roman wine and the clinking of chains, yet I could already feel the wind carrying news heavy with blood and hope. It was the first servile war. I was not among those who took part, not yet, but every fiber of my body was shaken, as if the cry of those distant brothers echoed in the bones that one day would know the arena. It was not a simple uprising, no. It was an ancient scream, as long as the generations of men broken and bent under the master's whips. Sicily, that golden granary of Rome, far from Thrace, had become a furnace. The fertile fields that gave bread to the Roman plebs were watered with the sweat and blood of thousands of men deprived of freedom. They had been treated worse than beasts of burden, humiliated, pushed to the limit. And finally, they rose. No more bent backs, no more lowered gazes. They took up sticks, broken plows, kitchen knives. They took back their dignity. I was told their leader was named Eunice, came from Syria, a proud man, but deprived of his own freedom like all the others, with a vision. They said he could spit fire from his mouth, that he was possessed by an Eastern deity. What did it matter if it was true? That fire burned in the hearts of all who followed him. I saw the spark in the stories of merchants, in the whispers of taverns. The lowest have formed an army. They have defeated the masters. They have taken entire cities. Rome was slow to understand, always so haughty, so sure of its eternity. It thought it was just a passing flame. They sent mediocre commanders with tired troops, thinking the fear of the eagle would make those who had nothing left to lose kneel. But they were wrong. The rebels resisted, struck, hid, then returned to the attack. It was a dirty war, a war of the people against the civilization of oppression. Yet I knew it, I felt it even from afar. It would not last. Rome does not let those who challenge it survive. In the end, it overwhelmed them. Not with reason, not with justice, but with iron and fire. It massacred them. Streets strewn with bodies, severed heads displayed as warnings. They thought they had closed the matter, washed away the blood with more blood, but they had only silenced a volcano. A few years passed, not many. And again the island trembled. This time it was the Second Servile War. Rome was struggling elsewhere, threatened by the Cimbri and the Teutones, those giants from the north that seemed to have stepped out of a winter tale. The Senate called to arms every man it could, even from Sicily. But there, instead of loyalty, it found rage. They had continued to treat men like objects. Broken promises, denied freedom. Free men turned slaves to fill the ranks of the army, or to work even harder on the estates. It was inevitable. They exploded. This time it was worse. It was no longer just a revolt. It was a war. A real, fierce, desperate war against Rome. The legions wavered. For a moment brief, but eternal in the hearts of those who dreamed of freedom, it seemed that the masters could lose the island. I imagined those armed men, proud, their broken chains turning into weapons, faces marked by hardship, but also by hope. I imagined the masters fleeing, villas burning, statues toppled. But once again, Rome won. It understood nothing of what would truly end the revolt. Yet it won. It once again used blind force, numbers, and organization. It crushed every dream with the brutality of victors who do not listen. No reforms, no reflection, only silence and threats. It crushed even harder those already oppressed. I had not yet taken up the sword, had not yet shed blood for freedom, but even then my heart beat in unison with those unknown brothers. When I was later captured, trained as a gladiator, and found myself in the arena, when I saw beasts and men kill each other for the pleasure of those who believed themselves gods, I did not forget. Those stories, those names, those revolts were inside me like seeds waiting for rain. My war, the one the world would remember as the Third Servile War, did not arise from nothing. It was born of those first fires. I was just another face, another voice in the chorus of the forgotten. But without Eunice, without those first rebels who dared to dream of freedom, I would not have found courage. Their bones buried in Sicilian soil, those crosses along the roads, were the roots of my rebellion. My revolt was only the last song of a tragedy that began long before me. A Roman tragedy, yes, but also a human one. Because what a man asks for when he has nothing left is only one thing: to be treated as a man. And Rome, with its gold and its laws, with its order and its glories, never understood that a broken chain can become a sword. When I think back to those days, I still feel the iron in my hands and the hunger in my stomach. Hunger for bread, certainly, but also hunger for justice, hunger for life. The revolt that later took my name was not born from a plan. There was no strategy, no ambitious design for conquest. The revolt was born from pain. From torn flesh, from trampled dreams, from sleepless nights spent counting scars. It was born in Capua, in the rotten belly of the Republic, where men became beasts for the pleasure of their masters. I was one of those gladiators. Not by choice, never by choice. I had been bought, branded, trained like a war dog. Capua had the reputation of the best gladiatorial school in all of Italy, and it was no lie. There champions were made, yes, but men were also broken. Every day we sweated, bled, killed just to stay alive. Every day we were given just enough food not to die. We were told we were lucky that in the arenas we would become legends. But a legend cannot embrace a child, cannot love a wife, cannot stay near an aging mother, cannot choose its own fate, cannot even die when it wants to. We were 200 that day in 73 BC. Maybe more. Not all ready. Not all determined, but enough. It took little, some kitchen tools, a few spits, blades stolen in secret, and rage. That never failed. It was strong, relentless. With that, you can overthrow a world. We fled. We broke out from the walls that had kept us prisoners, like a river breaking its banks. We began to raid, not for revenge, but for hunger, to survive. We struck at the masters, the rich, those who had watched us die for years without lifting a finger. And in this whirlwind of flight and fire, we chose 3 leaders. Crassus, the gladiator from Gaul, strong as an oak. Oenomus, a silent and cunning Thracian, and me, Spartacus. My name began to run on the lips of the fugitives, the weary peasants, the men deprived of freedom waiting for redemption. Rome, always blind in its arrogance, underestimated us. They thought we were just criminals, chicken thieves looking for loot. They didn't understand that we were men reborn, and nothing is more dangerous than a man who has tasted freedom. They sent a first commander, Gaius Claudius Glaber. He gathered 3,000 men, but they were not soldiers. They were armed shepherds, frightened citizens, makeshift militias. They came to capture us as they would bandits. They never thought we would be difficult to defeat, because to them we were only animals, circus clowns. To them, our battles in the arena were pure fiction. The blood we shed, our deaths, did not even scratch them. To them, to the masters, we were nothing. We took refuge on Vesuvius. From there we could see Campania spread out like a sea of grain and smoke. We were surrounded with no apparent way out. Glaber thought he had us trapped, but he didn't know our strength and desperation. He didn't know what a man with nothing left to lose can do. If they had caught us, we would have died anyway, or in the worst case, ended up chained again, and that was unacceptable to all of us. We had breathed freedom and were willing to accept nothing less. We were willing to die, yes, but as free men. On Vesuvius, I learned what freedom was. It was not how I had imagined it in the long days spent in Capua's cells, among sweat, screams, and blood spilled to entertain the fat men in the stands. Freedom tasted like the iron bitterness of hunger, the biting cold of the night, the sound of the wind crashing against the mountain's flank. But it also had a warmth that burned in my chest, as if every heartbeat was a cry of defiance. There we were, on that sleeping volcano, hunted and hungry men, fleeing gladiators, trapped. Glaber and his soldiers, 3,000, they said, surrounded us. They were not true legions, but they were armed like real soldiers. Just looking at their weapons, helmets and spears pointed at us was enough to know that if we stayed, we would die. Slowly, of thirst or arrow, or all at once, in a furious charge at dawn. I looked at my companions, my brothers, lying on the ground with their eyes fixed on the sky, searching for answers among the stars. There were Gauls, Thracians, Syrians, Africans. No one spoke the same language, but we all knew the language of prison, the whip, survival. That was enough. Crassus stood and said to me, "What do we do, Spartacus? Die here like rats?" "No," I answered, looking him in the eyes. "We will die if die we must with the sword in our hands." That was when we began to imagine the impossible. On the southern side of Vesuvius, the one facing the steepest, roughest valley, there were nearly vertical walls of lava rock. Glaber thought no one could climb down there. He had left us only one way out, the one controlled by his men, convinced that by surrounding us, he could starve us into surrender. They were wrong. The commanders of Rome rarely made mistakes, but they had underestimated us. They had underestimated our strength and our desperation. Rome was wrong about us, and because of that, history changed for Rome. We used what we had: ropes braided from wild grapevine branches, shoots stolen from the local vineyards. We braided them by night under the stars, while the youngest dug steps into the rock with their bare hands. Every moan, every wound was a prayer whispered to fate. Silence was our ally. We knew that if even one of them realized what we were planning, we would have been slaughtered. We descended like shadows down the steep side of Vesuvius, the side our enemy had not thought to guard because he believed it impassable. One by one. Barefoot, the stones cut our flesh. Our breath was short, our hands trembled. I was among the first to go down. I looked from above and saw the shapes moving, disappearing among the trees, becoming part of the night. No one shouted. No one fell. We seemed part of the mountain, children of the fire sleeping beneath us. When I touched the ground, I grabbed the gladius tied to my back. It was the only real weapon I had. The others held sticks, spits, farmers' sickles, everything we had been able to steal or make. Only a few had managed to find real swords, and we distributed them wisely to those who were strongest, best trained, who had already been fighters. But it didn't matter. It was enough. We moved wide and silent in the dark. We knew where the sentries were. We had watched them for days, studied their shifts, the fires, the movements. Glaber's camp was careless, made more of arrogance than discipline. When we attacked, it was like sudden thunder on a clear night. The sentries were the first to fall, some without even a cry, some without time to understand where we had come from. Then we struck the tents, the wagons, the fires from all directions. We screamed not words, but fury, the screams of those who have too much to lose to give up. The Roman soldiers rose in panic, disoriented, some in their underwear, others still drunk. There was no formation, no command. Glaber tried to gather his men, but it was too late. I saw him from afar, standing on a rock, trying to give orders. His toga was blood-stained and his face full of fear. His men fell around him, struck by my comrades with fierce precision. The ground was wet with blood and dew. Horses fled. Weapons fell to the ground like rain. Our assault was not a battle. It was a storm. The noise was deafening. Blades striking, screams, groans, the crackle of fire spreading among the Roman tents. But inside, for us, it was silence. Everything moved like in a dream. Every movement was pure, necessary. There was no blind rage, only clarity. We knew what we were doing. It was not revenge. It was birth. In that moment, among the smoke and the cries, something new was born. When the sun rose, the Roman camp was ours. The survivors fled like rats into the fields, leaving behind weapons, provisions, horses. We gathered everything that could be useful. We had nothing but our desperation and our pride, so everything the Roman soldiers left on the battlefield was essential to us. We obviously took the weapons, since we had none, and considered them of vital importance. But we also gathered the provisions, the supplies, and the animals. My men looked at each other. Some cried, others laughed hysterically, others knelt and touched the ground as if it were sacred. I remained standing, the bloodied gladius still clenched in my hand. I looked back at Vesuvius behind us, the mountain that had hidden us, protected us, kept us safe. We had deceived Rome. We had won. And in that silence after the storm, with smoke still rising to the sky, I thought this was not just the beginning of a flight. It was the beginning of a new existence. We had proven that freedom is not a gift, it is a right, and those ready to fight for it, even with bare hands, can make an empire tremble. It was a victory, the first of many. But for me, it was not just a battle won. It was a revelation. We all understood that Rome was not invincible, that even the eagle has a blind spot, that we too could be an army, gladiators could be commanders, fugitives could become a people. From that moment, my life changed. I was no longer a man on the run. I was a leader, a symbol, but I never felt like a symbol. I felt like a brother, a son of the earth, like all of them. I led men who had lost everything, and who precisely for that reason were willing to do anything. I watched them sleep around the fire, saw them kiss the earth that was finally no longer the master's. Every day someone joined us. Servants, shepherds, peasants, even disillusioned former legionaries. We were no longer just gladiators. We were a nation of the oppressed on the march. All those who could no longer bear Rome's overwhelming power over the weak, the oppressed, those who were not rich, those who had no rights. Yet I knew the road ahead would be long, that Rome would not allow this spark to become a fire. But we had no other choice. The alternative was to return to the cells, the arena, under the whip. And I had sworn I would never bow my head again. That if I were to die, it would be as a free man. I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders for all those men and women who joined us. Many of them were Roman citizens, born in the fields, poor and submissive to their masters, but still proud of their origins. We were no longer just a group of runaway gladiators. We were a people made up of men, women, children. A people thirsty for freedom and justice. A true civil war was brewing, and so the war began. The real war. I remember his name, Publius Varinius, a man with arrogance carved into his face like many of his peers. He believed his red tunic and the Senate's seal were enough to make us kneel. But he hadn't understood one thing. We had nothing left to lose, and those who have nothing fight as if every blow were their last. We were still in the heart of Campania. Our people grew day by day, men who no longer wanted to bow their heads. We had no discipline, no armor, but we had hunger. Hunger for justice, hunger for revenge, hunger for freedom. Varinius arrived with 2 legions, 2, and the uniforms. Even now I wonder why. Was it pride, impatience, or just ignorance? Part of his army camped along the Selle River, the other advanced toward the Volturno. He thought he was squeezing us like in a pincer. We squeezed him into his own trap. We had lookouts scattered everywhere. Barefoot men, swift as deer, moved through the mountains and valleys. Every movement of the Romans was reported to us. And when we were told that Varinius was marching toward us and had deployed his forces, I understood. It was time to strike. That night, I did not sleep. No one slept, really. The silence was heavy with tension, like before a storm. I walked among my comrades, watching them sharpen their blades, tighten the strings of their rudimentary bows, check the tips of their spears made from vineyard poles and farm tools. Men without training, but with burning eyes. The moon was high when we set out. We headed straight for the weakest part of Verinius's formation, the one left isolated. The Romans were not expecting us. Not yet. They thought our first victory, the one on Vesuvius, was just the result of the goddess Fortune briefly looking our way. They believed themselves the hunters, expecting to overwhelm us by surprise, but we had been watching them for days. We struck at dawn. It was a wave. No cries, no orders blown through trumpets. Only the rustling of grass underfoot, then the roar of our hearts exploding in our chests. I ran ahead, the gladius clenched tight, and every step felt like a verdict. We were hundreds, thousands. Men and women with mud on their legs and freedom in their eyes. The Romans barely had time to form lines. Some were still tying their sandals, others grabbing weapons in panic. The front lines were overwhelmed. Our spears crashed down on their shields like hammers on the gates of power. The ground was stained red. I fought fiercely, but every strike was precise. I remember a centurion who stood before me, helmet plumed, shield decorated. He looked at me with disdain. He mistook my nakedness for weakness. But I needed no gold to be strong, because I felt strength in justice. I parried his blow, spun him around, and my gladius found his neck. He fell like a felled tree. Behind me, Crassus shouted like a god of war. Enomau struck with a two-handed axe, carving a path through enemy lines. It was organized chaos, a whirlwind where our hearts beat as one. When Verinius realized what was happening, he tried to rally his forces, but it was too late. His two legions were too far apart to aid each other. The other part of his army, by the river, watched in stunned silence at the defeat. When they tried to move, they found the roads blocked. We had burned the bridges, felled the trees, turned the terrain into a trap. Verinius himself was forced to flee. I saw him far away, escorted by a few cavalrymen. A Roman commander, a fugitive, a symbol of his own impotence. When the battle ended, the field was ours. The sun shone on corpses, abandoned weapons, overturned carts. Just like on Vesuvius, some of my men dropped to their knees, thanking the gods. Others wept. I remained standing, blood dripping from my arms, breath ragged, eyes fixed on the horizon. We had defeated 2 legions. We had shattered the myth of Roman invincibility, and our army was growing, more and more. In those days, the wind carried our name to the edges of Italy, but I knew it was not over. Every victory was a step, every battle won a roar. But Rome does not forget. Rome does not forgive. And we had inflicted a wound deep in Rome's pride, a wound where we poured salt simply by existing. We could not stay still for long. We had to find a way to escape. At that point, we left Campania, still stained with the blood of Verinius' soldiers. The echo of our victories had already reached the hills of the Senate, and Rome could no longer ignore us. I knew the next move would be more calculated, more cruel. They had understood this was no longer a band of fugitives, but a people on the march. Rome responded as it always did when it felt fear, with violence. They sent 2 generals, Lucius Gellius Publicola from the south, and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Claudianus from the north. 2 blades, one to cut, the other to sting. The plan was simple and cruel: trap us, squeeze us between two armies, and crush us like a worm. Crassus was the first to take the blow. He had chosen to stay behind with some men to loot and provide us with food and weapons. He knew, we all knew, that he was exposing himself to risk, but we were many, and somehow we had to feed all those people. There was no time for regrets. Gellius descended on him like a beast, and the battle was fierce. Crassus fought with all his heart, with the fury he had had since the moment I met him. But it wasn't enough. A messenger arrived at sunset. He didn't speak. He trembled. One gesture was enough. A clenched fist on his chest, then an arm stretched down to the earth. Crassus had fallen, one of our best, one of my brothers. The pain was not a burden. It was a flame. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I only swore. We would never surrender. Never. We marched north toward the Alps, toward the freedom that seemed closer with every step. But Rome had foreseen our move. Lentulus was waiting for us with his legions, blocking every pass. Gellius pressed us from the south. We were trapped between two fires. No way out. Yet I tell you, we did not tremble. None among us begged for mercy. Not one, not even for a moment, proposed surrender. In the faces of my comrades, dirty with mud and fatigue, I read only one thing: determination. We were gladiators, peasants, shepherds, slaves. But in that moment, we were an army, all with the same determination, all with the same will. We studied the terrain, the mountains, the valleys, the gorges. We knew every tree, every stone, every goat-worn path. We were children of the land, not strategists from an academy. But the land, when you listen, guides you. I decided to strike Lentulus first. He was farthest from his ally. His army, orderly but arrogant, believed it would contain us. We faced them at dawn when the fog still slept on the hills. It was a hurricane. We emerged from the woods like wolves. No signals, no Roman formation could withstand our onslaught. We shouted Crassus' name, carrying it like a banner, like a sword. The first Roman shields flew in the air, shattered like eggshells. Horses panicked, order broke. I led the charge. My arm did not stop. Every strike I delivered was for the fallen, for the chained, for Crassus. I remember the face of a young Roman tribune, helmet shining, eyes frightened. He thought his rank would protect him, but my blade recognized no hierarchy, only chains to break. Lentulus fled. His men, defeated, left weapons, standards, horses on the field. We gathered them all once again, and while our men sang victory, I was already thinking of Gellius. There would be no respite. We advanced southward, fast, fierce. They were not expecting us. They thought we would take time to catch our breath, to tend wounds. They believed they were chasing us. But we were the ones who surprised them, like the sudden nightfall. The clash with Gellius was tougher. His men were well-trained veterans and disciplined. But they were tired. They didn't expect an army of desperates to maneuver like that. We attacked their flanks, struck the rear, set food supplies on fire, sowed panic. The legionaries fought bravely, but even they were forced to acknowledge our valor. When our heavy infantry peasants in stolen armor overwhelmed the center of the field, Gellius understood he could not win and decided not to sacrifice his troops any further. He withdrew. Rome responded as it always did when it felt fear, with violence. They sent 2 generals, Lucius Gellius Publicola from the south, and Gnaeus Cornelius Lentulus Clodianus from the north. 2 blades, one to cut, the other to sting. The plan was simple and cruel. Trap us, squeeze us between 2 armies, and crush us like a worm. Crassus was the first to take the blow. He had chosen to stay behind with some men to loot and provide us with food and weapons. He knew, we all knew, that he was exposing himself to risk. But we were many, and somehow we had to feed all those people. There was no time for regrets. Gellius descended on him like a beast, and the battle was fierce. Crassus fought with all his heart, with the fury he had had since the moment I met him. But it wasn't enough. A messenger arrived at sunset. He didn't speak. He trembled. One gesture was enough. A clenched fist on his chest, then an arm stretched down to the earth. Crassus had fallen, one of our best, one of my brothers. The pain was not a burden, it was a flame. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I only swore. We would never surrender, never. We marched north toward the Alps, toward the freedom that seemed closer with every step. But Rome had foreseen our move. Lentulus was waiting for us with his legions, blocking every pass. Gellius pressed us from the south. We were trapped between 2 fires, no way out. Yet I tell you, we did not tremble. None among us begged for mercy. Not one, not even for a moment, proposed surrender. In the faces of my comrades, dirty with mud and fatigue, I read only one thing: determination. We were gladiators, peasants, shepherds, slaves. But in that moment, we were an army, all with the same determination, all with the same will. We studied the terrain, the mountains, the valleys, the gorges. We knew every tree, every stone, every goat-worn path. We were children of the land, not strategists from an academy. But the land, when you listen, guides you. I decided to strike Lentulus first. He was farthest from his ally. His army, orderly but arrogant, believed it could contain us. We faced them at dawn, when the fog still slept on the hills. It was a hurricane. We emerged from the woods like wolves. No signals. No Roman formation could withstand our onslaught. We shouted Crassus' name, carrying it like a banner, like a sword. The first Roman shields flew in the air, shattered like eggshells. Horses panicked. Order broke. I led the charge. My arm did not stop. Every strike I delivered was for the fallen, for the chained, for Crassus. I remember the face of a young Roman tribune, helmet shining, eyes frightened. He thought his rank would protect him, but my blade recognized no hierarchy, only chains to break. Lentulus fled. His men, defeated, left weapons, standards, horses on the field. We gathered them all, once again. And while our men sang victory, I was already thinking of Gellius. There would be no respite. We advanced southward, fast, fierce. They were not expecting us. They thought we would take time to catch our breath, to tend wounds. They believed they were chasing us. But we were the ones who surprised them, like the sudden nightfall. The clash with Gellius was tougher. His men were well-trained veterans and disciplined, but they were tired. They didn't expect an army of desperates to maneuver like that. We attacked their flanks, struck the rear, set food supplies on fire, sowed panic. The legionaries fought bravely, but even they were forced to acknowledge our valor. When our heavy infantry peasants in stolen armor overwhelmed the center of the field, Gellius understood he could not win and decided not to sacrifice his troops any further. He withdrew. I sought revenge. I sought freedom. And in that battle, even as the sun set over a field strewn with our bodies, even as Roman standards waved through the dust, I felt within me an unshakable truth. They had fought us. They had feared us. They had hated us. But never, never had they broken us. Yet we were forced to quickly retreat southward, retracing the Italian peninsula. We were in Metaponto. The red, harsh land of Basilicata welcomed our weary steps. Our eyes were turned northward once again. There, perhaps, salvation was hidden. There, perhaps, the way out of a war that had devoured time and men. But Crassus was a shadow ahead of us. Wherever we pointed our path, he was there before us, as if Rome itself had given him black wings and a step of steel. We did not go unnoticed. We were more than 50,000 now, all revolted against the power of Rome. Our movement north was shattered with the brutality of an axe on wood. His legions intercepted us. There was no time to outflank or reason, only clash, only death. I remember the sound, not of swords, but of breath. That breath that grew short, broken, heavy with anxiety and resolve. We still had tens of thousands of men, but we also had women and children, and Crassus, with his discipline imposed by terror, faced us as if we were a pack of wolves to be exterminated. His men feared him more than us. This made them dangerous. For days we clashed on that rough land. Dawn brought only new marches, new wounds. The night offered no rest, only the pain of fallen comrades. Our provisions dwindled, and trust began to waver. But I did not retreat. I could not. I wanted to end it all in one blow, one gesture, one duel. I sought Crassus. I cut through the melee like a thirsty shadow. I called him out loud. Rome had always been proud of its heroes. Fine, let it face one. Let it face 100 in me alone. But I did not find him. Only a centurion near him, one of his most trusted officers. I saw him, reached him, faced him. It was not him I wanted, but his death served the same purpose. A message. My sword pierced him like a cutting wind. His eyes went dark without even a cry. That was the fate I reserved for his commander as well. Yet Crassus kept tightening the noose around us. He won victories, small but venomous. He cut off our army's communications, forced us to move, to give ground. Southward, further down, toward the edge of the land. We reached Calabria, and there our dream shone again, if only for a moment. The pirates, the Cilicians. Men of the sea, without masters or laws, merchants of wind and opportunity. They had seen Rome burn coasts and villages. I thought they would understand. I thought our cause would find allies even in their mercenary hearts. We paid them gold, weapons, loot, all we had. They promised us Sicily. There we would rekindle the revolt. We would gather more men. We would have a new army, but the pirates never came. Rome had paid more than us, and they, mercenary scoundrels, betrayed us. They vanished into the night like ghosts. took our gold and fled, leaving us on the shore to watch a sea that now seemed to mock us. It was then I understood. We were alone. Crassus did not wait. He did not miss the chance. He saw us stopped, abandoned, lost. And he moved like a hunter who has smelled the blood of a wounded prey. He began the siege, not with fire and swords, but with cunning and steel. He started building like a tireless spider. Fortifications, walls, trenches, moats. He wanted to trap us like in a tomb dug on the tip of Italy's boot. He wanted to let us die slowly, between hunger, fear, and surrender. But I did not surrender. Every night I walked among the camps. My men looked at me as one looks at the wind before the storm. Some trembled, others gritted their teeth, but all of them followed me. I spoke little, but my eyes said what was needed. We would not end on our knees. We spoke among ourselves and made a decision. We would not surrender this time either. We organized sorties, brief, targeted attacks. We tried to break the ring. Sometimes we won small patches of ground. Sometimes we paid dearly for every step. But we never stopped. It was our last dance, and we wanted to dance it to the clangor of steel. Crassus was tightening his grip on us. The circle grew smaller each day, but inside that circle there were us. Flames, not shadows. I was ready to die, but never to yield. Rome wanted my head, but I would show it my heart, whole, invincible. Even if it stopped beating, even if trampled. When I understood there was no way out, that every path was cut off, every hope consumed by hunger, exhaustion, and the betrayal of winds and men, then I did what honor demanded. I did not think only of myself, but of the boys, the women, and children who were with us. It was not cowardice, but clarity. I sent messengers to Crassus. I offered peace, a chance for those who still followed me, for those who still believed the world could change by will and not by sword. But Crassus did not want peace. He wanted glory. He wanted the head of the barbarian who had dared to humiliate Rome. He wanted to hold my defeat like a trophy to show the Senate, Pompey, everyone. Pompey, yes, I knew. We all knew. He had returned from Spain, hailed and full of victories, and now he was moving south, like a vulture circling a field where the lion has already bitten. Crassus did not intend to share the spoils, the praise, the triumph with him, and so he came looking for me. Not with words, but with blades. Not with laws, but with the hunger of a wolf who has seen the prey stagger. The fighting resumed, furious, without quarter, without order. We broke through his fortifications, built with sweat and blood. Crassus was forced to chase us, he, the Lord of Order, forced into chaos. The earth was already tired of our weight, of our bones. Every battle was a voiceless scream. Every clash stole the breath of dozens, hundreds. Bodies fell, and there was no time to mourn, only to trample and advance. We moved north again, like a flame seeking air, refusing to die, but in that last run, we met Pompey's long shadow. He did not attack. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough. We understood. I understood. We were surrounded. The pincers closed. Rome gripped us with 2 hands, and there was no escape. So I turned back, I looked at my men. Many were exhausted, wounded. Others had lost faith, their eyes dim with the awareness that our dream was ending. But there were others still burning, still believing it was possible to die standing as free men, not kneeling. I led them against Crassus, again, for the last time. The battle was fierce. The war drums mixed with cries, shouted commands, metal breaking bones and cutting souls. I was on the front line, as always. Sword drawn, heart aflame. I had sworn I would not surrender, that I would fight to the last beat, to the last breath. That they would not have me alive, that I would not be a trophy dragged in chains to Rome. And so I did. Our lines gave way little by little, not for lack of courage, but for pure, relentless exhaustion. They fought with training, we with memory. They with the strength of empire, we with the rage of men who had lost freedom. Then came the worst. Some, overcome by panic and the exhaustion of 2 years on the run, began to falter, to turn their backs on me, to bargain for themselves. Small betrayals, like thin blades, slipped between shoulder blades. I saw them, I recognized them. But there was no time for revenge, and in a way I understood they had given all they had and could bear no more suffering. I no longer sought victory. I sought Crassus, once more, but he, cold as ice, stayed far, protected, too important to fight like a man, too precious to get his hands dirty with the blood he demanded. So I struck where I could. Romans, legionaries, officers, they formed a circle around me. They tried to stop me. And I danced in death, every blow a cry, every slash an act of faith. My body was already wounded, but not my soul. That burned. They struck me. Once, twice, 3 times. But I still screamed, still gripped the blade. At last, I fell. I don't know if I screamed. I don't know if I smiled. But I know I died with my hands stained by the blood of my enemies. I know my body was never found. Maybe they made it disappear, fearing that even in death I could still inspire rebellion in the oppressed. I only know that my comrades, those who did not surrender, were crucified along the Appian Way, one by one, to remind Rome and the world what happens to those who rebel. If my name still lives, it is because my actions were fire, and fire, even when extinguished, always leaves warm ashes beneath the skin of history. When my heart stopped beating on the battlefield, it was not just my end, but the beginning of another battle, another kind of battle. Not between oppressed and oppressors, not between the free and the chained, but among the oppressors themselves. Hyenas on a warm corpse, ready to fight not for truth, but for the story. Not for honor, but for the image of honor. Crassus, the man who had gripped my throat with iron hands, thought he had won everything, not just the war, but history itself. He believed that blood alone consecrated glory, that the fierce discipline of his legions and the miles of crosses bearing my comrades' bodies would be enough to bring the Senate to his feet. But Rome does not reward those who fight. Rome rewards those who tell the story of victory first, and Pompey knew this. Pompey arrived late, but like a wolf watching a lion wound the prey before delivering the final bite. When my men were already shattered, scattered, and hunted, He killed 5,000 of them. My last. The most desperate, the most weary, but still proud. 5,000 souls who deserved to fall at my side, but were instead crushed by a man who wanted only a title. Then, with swift steps and a tongue sharper than any sword, Pompey reached the Senate. He was the first to speak, the first to say, "The war is over." He was the first to bow, but with chest out, to praise Crassus, yes, but in a way that made his words both praise and wound. He fought, he won many battles, of course. But it was I who crushed the last breath of the revolt. The last breath, mine, and the Senate believed him, because politics does not love those who follow the rules. It loves those who bend them with elegance. Crassus had been too rigid, too brutal, too blunt. Pompey, instead, had smiled while fighting us. He knew how to be cold, clean, decorated. Crassus received the crowd's ovation once he returned to Rome. A dignified ceremony, yes, but modest. A restrained applause. Pompey got the triumph. The city draped in gold, flowers, crowns, the crowd shouting his name as if he were a god returned from an epic war. And Crassus? On the day of Pompey's triumph, he stood with a dark cloak, his gaze fixed on the glory being torn from him. And inside him, a fire that was not passion, but poison. Hatred, a hatred no battle would ever soothe. I never knew the luxury of power. My victories were stolen freedom, dignity restored. Theirs were gold coins and statues, busts carved by hands that knew nothing of toil, mud, or fear. Yet I saw them, Crassus and Pompey, fight not for Rome, but for their own reflection in history's mirror, like greedy children, unable to share a trophy. And me? I who had forced them to tremble, I who had made Rome look in the mirror and fear what it saw, I who had revealed that even the oppressed, the humble, could rise and bite. I was nothing anymore. A name Pompey could use as bargaining chip, a trophy to pin on his purple cloak. And yet I had forced them to show themselves for what they were. Crassus, with his thirst for order, his obsession with discipline, his blind desire for domination. Pompey, with his shining political ambition, his statue-like face and forked tongue. And the Senate, as always, was spectator and judge, but not of truth, of convenience. They gave glory to the one who spoke first, to the one who told the story the way he wanted it to be, to the one who killed the fugitives and called them final enemies. And even if my body was trampled by iron and buried in silence, my voice has never stopped screaming. My war is over. My blood was washed away by rain and covered by hard earth. My brothers crucified along the Appian Way have become shadows, numbers, warnings carved in fear. But what Rome did not know, or perhaps understood too late, is that our cry, that of the damned, the bound, the forgotten, dug deep cracks in the highest walls of power. I had no throne. I wore no purple, carried no scepter. My only emblem was a sword, and my people, an army of the wounded. And yet what we did was not useless. It was not dust. Rome annihilated us, yes, but then it listened. Reluctantly, with wounded pride, with the arrogance of those who do not admit mistakes but change course anyway, it began to see. It began to understand that a system founded on eternal pain could only breed revolt, that a chained man does not remain so forever, that even the most humiliated man can stand up and turn chains into weapons. When the screams quieted and the crosses began to rot in the sun, something changed. Not in the statues, not in the senators, but in small, hidden gestures. The masters, fearful of the wind we had raised, began to look at their servants with a bit more respect. Fear, perhaps, or foresight. The wisest realized it was better to have a free and paid man than a desperate one with a knife in hand. The chains loosened, little by little. The fields that once echoed only with laments began to host free men, paid peasants, workers with names. It was not the full freedom we dreamed of with sword raised, but it was a step, a crack, a drop that wears away stone. Rome was changing slowly. To survive, yes, because it feared that another Spartacus might rise. But in that change was our most subtle victory, the one not measured in battles won, but in shaken consciences. And then came the laws. Oh, not out of mercy, no. Rome does not know mercy, but it knows calculation. It knows fear disguised as reform. The great emperors Augustus, Marcus Aurelius, Antoninus Pius issued edicts, rules, regulations. Laws that limited the absolute power of the master. Laws that punished gratuitous cruelty, that protected the old, the sick, the weak. Who would have ever imagined that one day in Rome a man could be condemned for killing someone who had no freedom, without cause? That abuse, once common currency among the rich, could become a crime. I did not see those days, but I dreamed them. I wrote them with every scar. Every law, every word penned by the senators, has a root planted in our pain. I do not speak of glory. There is no glory in defeat. There is no triumph in dying on the field. But there is memory. There is trace. And that cannot be erased. Rome won the war, but it lost something deeper, the illusion of invulnerability. It had to bend, to shed its skin. It understood that iron and fire are not enough to tame the human soul, and that freedom, even when crushed, sprouts, always. When laws began to protect those who never had a voice, I was there. Not in flesh, no, but in conscience, in the burning flame, in the fear of the patricians and the relief of the slaves. Perhaps my men died in vain, some say. Perhaps we were only the fire of one night. I do not believe it. I believe in the furrows we carved, in the ideas we shouted. I believe that every master who hesitated before raising his rod, every judge who handed down a more humane sentence, did so because they saw, even for a moment, the face of one of us who refused to bow. My face. I am Spartacus. I had no monuments. I had no grave, but I had an echo, and the echo is more powerful than marble. Rome killed me, but it ended up proving me right, and that is my true victory. Now you know the story of Spartacus, told through the echoes of his own courageous defiance. From slavery to rebellion, from chains to a legacy that endured beyond his last breath, his life was a relentless pursuit of freedom and dignity. So now, you can relax. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and gently imagine how it might have felt to walk alongside Spartacus. to breathe the same air of anticipation, to feel the pulse of freedom racing through your veins, to hear the hushed whispers of fellow rebels by nightfall. Let these visions glide softly through your mind, fading gently like distant embers. Allow your breathing to slow, your thoughts settling calmly like dust on ancient battlefields. You are safe. You are calm. You are here. Let the warm glow of the Roman fireplace embrace you softly. Let the steady, comforting crackle of the flames become the only sound you hear. This day is done. The Empire sleeps, and now you can rest. No battles left to fight, no chains left to break, just your slow, soothing breath. And the gentle shifting of embers, whispering quiet stories of courage and peace. Let your shoulders ease, your jaw release. Your thoughts drift like gentle smoke into the calm night. You're safe. You're here. Tonight, dream softly of unbroken chains, of open fields, of quiet triumphs awaiting you under the stars. Now, close your eyes. The fire crackles, the tents are still, and all of Rome sleeps.